The black Mercedes pulled up to the curb on Maple Street just as the autumn sun began its descent behind the skeletal trees. Marcus Hammond sat in the back seat, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the deteriorating neighborhood outside his tinted window. He'd left this place 23 years ago with nothing but the clothes on his back and a heart full of determination. Now, at 34, he was returning as one of the country's youngest self-made billionaires, founder of Hammond Technologies. But he wasn't here to celebrate. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Hammond?" his assistant, Jennifer, asked from the front seat, her voice uncertain as she glanced at the dilapidated Victorian house that had once been his home. Marcus didn't answer immediately. The house looked even worse than he remembered, paint peeling like dried skin, windows cracked and clouded with grime, the porch sagging under the weight of decades of neglect. This was where his parents had died when he was 11, first his mother to cancer, then his father to grief and alcohol 6 months later. This was where the state had found him, alone and frightened, before shuffling him through a series of foster homes that taught him to trust no one but himself. "I'm sure," he said finally, his voice flat. "I should have done this years ago." He'd bought the property through a series of shell companies as soon as he'd had the means, unable to bear the thought of strangers, living where his mother had sung him lullabies, where his father had taught him to ride a bike in the backyard. But he'd never had the courage to return until now. Tomorrow, the demolition crew would arrive. By next week, the lot would be empty. By next month, he'd sell it and finally close this chapter of his life forever. Marcus stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the broken sidewalk. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. He walked slowly toward the house, memories flooding back with each step. There was the oak tree, where he'd built a treehouse. There was the window of his bedroom, where he'd watched for his father to come home each night. He reached the front door and pulled out the key the property management company had sent him. His hand trembled slightly as he inserted it into the lock, a detail that annoyed him. Marcus Hammond didn't tremble. He'd faced down boardrooms full of skeptical investors, negotiated billion-dollar deals, built an empire from nothing. A ruined house shouldn't affect him. The key turned with a rusty groan, and he pushed the door open. The smell hit him first, not the musty abandonment he'd expected, but something alive.
Soap. Cooking.
Baby powder. Marcus froze in the doorway, his mind struggling to process what his senses were telling him. Light spilled from what had once been the kitchen, warm and golden. He heard a sound that made his blood run cold, a child's laughter. "Hello," he called out, his voice sharp with confusion and rising anger. "This is private property. You're trespassing." The laughter stopped. Footsteps approached quickly, light and hurried. Then she appeared in the hallway, a young woman with dark blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a faded sweater. Her eyes were wide with fear, her face pale. She couldn't have been more than 27, and in her arms, she clutched a tiny infant wrapped in a worn blue blanket. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please don't call the police. I can explain." Behind her, a little girl peered around the corner, no more than 3 years old, with the same blonde hair and frightened eyes. She held a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Marcus stood frozen, his prepared anger dissolving into confusion.
"Who are you?"
"How did you get in here?" "My name is Emma. Emma Porter." She shifted the baby higher on her shoulder, her arms visibly shaking. "I'm so sorry. I know we shouldn't be here. I didn't have anywhere else to go." "That doesn't answer my question. This house has been locked for years. It's structurally unsound. You could have been killed." Emma's chin lifted slightly, and despite her obvious fear, Marcus saw a flash of dignity in her eyes. "I'm a maid. Or I was. I worked for the Hendersons 3 blocks over for 5 years. When Mrs. Henderson died last year, her son sold the house and let all the staff go. I lost my job and then I lost my apartment." She glanced down at the baby. "I was 7 months pregnant with nowhere to go. There are shelters. Social services." The shelters were full. They had a 6-week waiting list. Her voice grew stronger, defensive. "I tried everything. Do you think I wanted to break into an abandoned house? Do you think I wanted to raise my children in a place that could fall down around us any day? Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening.
Not now.
Not when he was so close to putting this all behind him. How did you even get in? The basement window. The lock was broken. Emma's shoulders sagged. I found this place 6 months ago. I was desperate. Just me and Sophie. She nodded toward the little girl. I thought no one would notice. The house looked like it had been empty forever. I fixed what I could, made it safe. I've been working odd jobs, cleaning houses for cash, saving every penny to try to find us a real place. When Liam came, she looked down at the infant, and her voice softened. I just needed a little more time. The little girl, Sophie, stepped forward, still clutching her rabbit. Are you going to make us leave? She asked, her voice tiny. This is our home. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. That word. Home. He looked around the hallway with new eyes. Emma had cleaned it, he realized. The floors were swept, the walls wiped down. There were cheerful drawings taped to the peeling wallpaper, a child's attempt to make beauty from decay. Through the doorway to the living room, he could see blankets arranged on the floor, a makeshift bed. Books stacked neatly in the corner. A small lamp providing gentle light. She'd made a home here, in his house, in the place he'd tried so hard to forget. Tomorrow, he said, his voice rough, there's a demolition crew coming. This whole house is scheduled to be torn down. Emma's face went white. The baby in her arms began to fuss, as if sensing his mother's distress. Tomorrow? But where will we? She couldn't finish the sentence. Sophie wrapped her arms around her mother's leg, beginning to cry. Marcus stood there, looking at this young mother and her 2 children who had turned his abandoned past into their fragile present, and felt the carefully constructed walls around his heart begin to crumble, like the house around them. Pack your things, he said abruptly. You can't stay here tonight. It's not safe. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Please, just give us until morning. I promise we'll be gone. I just need to figure out. I have a hotel suite downtown, Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with the words even as he spoke them. It has 2 bedrooms. You'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. Emma stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. I don't understand. Marcus didn't understand either. He should call the police. He should have his lawyers handle this. Instead, he found himself looking at Sophie's tear-stained face and remembering another child in this house, alone and afraid, with nowhere to go. I don't make a habit of throwing homeless children into the street, he said, more harshly than he intended. Get whatever you need. My car is outside. As Emma rushed to gather their few belongings, Marcus stepped deeper into the house, his house, and felt the past he'd tried to bury rising up to meet him. The presidential suite at the Meridian Hotel occupied the entire 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape. Emma stood in the center of the marble foyer, clutching Liam against her chest while Sophie pressed against her leg, both of them frozen in place like refugees who'd stumbled into a palace. The master bedroom is through there, Marcus said, gesturing vaguely down the hall. There's a 2nd bedroom next to it. Take whichever you want. Both have en-suite bathrooms. Emma couldn't speak. The foyer alone was larger than the entire basement apartment she'd lost 8 months ago. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across walls covered in silk. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. She was acutely aware of her threadbare sweater, the hole in Sophie's left shoe, the stains on Liam's blanket that wouldn't come out no matter how many times she washed it. I can't, she whispered. This is too much. Marcus was already walking toward the bar, pulling his phone from his pocket. There's a 24-hour room service menu on the desk. Order whatever you need. I'll be in my office making some calls. Mr. Hammond, Marcus. He stopped, his back still to her. And, before you thank me, don't. I'm not a good person doing you a favor. I'm just dealing with a complication. The words stung, but Emma understood them. She was a problem to be solved, an inconvenience that had disrupted his plans. She'd learned long ago not to expect kindness from wealthy people. They gave out of obligation or tax deductions, never from genuine compassion. "Come on, baby," she murmured to Sophie, who was still staring wide-eyed at everything. "Let's find somewhere to sleep." The second bedroom was decorated in soft creams and golds, with a king-sized bed that looked like it had never been slept in. Emma laid Liam gently in the center, building a fortress of pillows around him, then helped Sophie climb up. Her daughter's eyes were drooping with exhaustion. It had been a long, frightening evening. "Mama, is the angry man going to take our house away?" Sophie asked, her small voice heavy with worry. Emma's throat tightened. "That house wasn't really ours, sweetheart. We were just borrowing it for a while." "But where will we go now?" It was the same question that had haunted Emma every day for the past 8 months, the question that woke her in the middle of the night with her heart racing and her stomach churning with anxiety. Where would they go? How would she keep her children safe? "I don't know yet," Emma said honestly, smoothing Sophie's hair back from her forehead. "But I promise you, I'll figure something out. I always do, don't I?" Sophie nodded, but her lower lip trembled. Emma lay down beside her children, fully clothed, listening to their breathing gradually slow and deepen. Only when she was sure they were asleep did she allow herself to cry, quiet, careful tears that she wiped away quickly, a luxury she couldn't afford for long. She must have dozed off because she woke to the sound of knocking on the door. Emma sat up quickly, disoriented by the unfamiliar luxury around her. The bedside clock read 11:47 p.m. "Miss Porter?" Marcus's voice came through the door, formal and distant. "I've ordered some food. You should eat." Emma slipped out of the bed, checking that both children were still sleeping peacefully, then opened the door. Marcus stood in the hallway, his suit jacket removed, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, she realized. Not just physically tired, but the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying too much for too long. In the suite's dining room, the table had been set with silver and china. Covered dishes released steam and delicious aromas: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, soup. Emma's stomach growled audibly, reminding her that she'd last eaten a peanut butter sandwich at noon. "I didn't know what you liked," Marcus said, pulling out a chair for her with stiff formality. "So, I ordered several options." "This is..." Emma struggled for words. "You didn't have to do all this. You're a nursing mother. You need to eat properly." He sat across from her, pouring water into crystal glasses. "When did you last have a real meal?" The question was asked clinically, like a doctor taking a medical history, but it made Emma's cheeks flush with shame. "I eat fine." "That's not what I asked." Emma picked up her fork, focusing on the food rather than his penetrating gaze. "I make sure Sophie and Liam have what they need. That's what matters." "And who makes sure you have what you need?" The question caught her off guard. She looked up to find Marcus watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, she would have hated pity, but something closer to recognition. "I take care of myself," she said quietly. "I've been doing it for a long time." Marcus was silent for a moment, then began serving food onto her plate with methodical precision. "Eat," he said simply. "We'll talk after." Emma was too hungry to argue. The food was extraordinary, nothing like the budget meals she'd been stretching to feed her family. As she ate, she became aware of Marcus watching her, his own plate barely touched. "Why did you come back?" she asked finally, needing to break the heavy silence. "To the house, I mean. After all these years." His jaw tightened. "To have it demolished. To erase it." "Why?" "Because it's time." He took a sip of water, his knuckles white around the glass. "I grew up in that house. My parents died there. I spent years in foster care because of what that house represented: loss, abandonment, pain. I built everything I have now specifically so I would never have to think about that place again." Emma set down her fork, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as the billionaire who'd found her trespassing, not as the angry man who'd threatened to call the police, but as someone who understood exactly what it meant to have nowhere to belong. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know. I never would have." "How could you have known?" Marcus interrupted, his voice hard. It's been abandoned for over 2 decades. You saw an empty house and an opportunity. I understand survival, Miss Porter. Probably better than you think.
Emma.
Please call me Emma. He nodded curtly.
Emma, then.
Tell me about your situation. The truth. Not the version you tell social workers to avoid losing your children. The blunt request should have offended her, but instead, Emma found herself grateful for his directness. She was tired of pretending, tired of putting on a brave face, tired of acting like everything was fine when she was drowning. I got pregnant with Sophie when I was 24, she began, her hands wrapped around the warm water glass. Her father was a guy I'd been seeing for about a year. When I told him about the pregnancy, he said I was trying to trap him. He left town. I never heard from him again. Marcus's expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. I thought I could manage on my own. I had a good job with the Hendersons, and they let me bring Sophie to work. Mrs. Henderson was kind. She loved having a baby around.
But then she got sick.
Really sick. Her son came from California to handle things, and when she died, he sold everything. The house, the furniture, even her jewelry. He gave us each 2 weeks severance and told us to clear out. That's illegal, Marcus said flatly. Maybe. But what was I going to do? Hire a lawyer? Fight him in court while I was pregnant and homeless? Emma shook her head. I tried to find another position, but every family wanted someone who could travel with them or work weekends. Nobody wanted to hire a pregnant single mother with a toddler. What about Liam's father? Emma's laugh was bitter.
David.
I met him at a community center where I was taking Sophie for free playtime. He seemed nice, stable. He worked construction, had his own apartment. We dated for a few months, and I thought maybe things were finally going to work out for me. I told him I was pregnant on the same day I got evicted from my apartment. She paused, the memory still painful. He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He gave me $300 and told me to take care of it. When I said I was keeping the baby, he blocked my number and moved. So you broke into my house. So, I broke into your house, Emma confirmed, meeting his eyes. And I would do it again. I know that makes me a criminal. I know I should have tried harder, been smarter, made better choices. But when you're standing on the street with a 3-year-old and you're 7 months pregnant, and every shelter is full, and every charity has a waiting list, you don't think about right and wrong. You think about survival. The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Marcus pushed back from the table and walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights. I was 11 when my parents died, he said, his voice low. The state came to get me 3 days after I buried my father. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought maybe a relative would take me in, but there was no one. My mother was an only child. My father's family had disowned him for marrying her. She was white, he was black, and apparently, that was unforgivable to them. Emma remained silent, sensing that he needed to tell this story. They put me in a group home first. 17 kids, 3 adults who didn't give a damn. I learned quickly that if I showed weakness, I'd be targeted. If I cried about missing my parents, the other kids would torment me.
So I stopped crying.
I stopped feeling anything. He turned to face her, and in the reflected city lights, his eyes were haunted. I aged out of the system at 18 with $200 and a garbage bag full of donated clothes. I slept in my car for 6 months while I worked 3 jobs and took online classes. It took me 10 years to build my first million. Another 4 to build my first billion. And now you want to tear down the place where it all started, Emma said softly. I wanted to erase the evidence that I was ever that scared, powerless kid. Marcus returned to the table, sitting down heavily. And then I found you there, turning my nightmare into your shelter. It was like the universe was laughing at me. I'm sorry I complicated your plans. Don't apologize for surviving. His tone was sharp. That's the one thing I can't stand, when people apologize for doing what they had to do to stay alive. Emma studied him across the table, seeing past the expensive clothes and the billionaire reputation to the orphaned boy underneath. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, I cancel the demolition. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking as surprised by his own words as Emma felt. And then we figure out what comes next. I don't expect you to. I know you don't expect anything. That's precisely why I'm going to help you. He stood abruptly. Get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning. As he walked away, Emma called after him. Marcus? Why are you doing this? Really? He paused at the doorway, his back to her. Because someone should have done it for me. Because that little girl in there deserves better than sleeping on the floor of a condemned house. Because, he trailed off, then finished quietly, because maybe if I help you, I can stop hating that place. Stop hating what I came from. Long after he'd gone, Emma sat at the table, looking out at the city lights and feeling, for the first time in months, like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Morning light flooded through the hotel suite's windows, waking Emma to the sound of Sophie's delighted laughter. She jolted upright, momentarily disoriented by the luxurious bedroom, before remembering where they were. The space beside her was empty. She could hear Sophie's voice coming from the living area. Emma quickly checked on Liam, who was still sleeping peacefully, then hurried toward the sound of her daughter's giggles. She stopped in the doorway, struck by the unexpected scene before her. Marcus sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, still wearing his dress shirt and slacks from the night before, though now wrinkled and untucked. Sophie had somehow convinced him to participate in a tea party with her stuffed rabbit and several pillows arranged as guests. He was holding a tiny plastic teacup with his large hand, his expression one of solemn concentration as Sophie poured invisible tea. You have to hold your pinky out, Sophie instructed seriously. That's how fancy people do it. Marcus adjusted his grip, extending his pinky with exaggerated care. Like this? Perfect. Sophie beamed at him, then noticed Emma standing there. Mama, Mr. Marcus is having tea with Mr. Hoppy and me. He's actually really good at it. Emma felt her heart squeeze. She couldn't remember the last time Sophie had played with another adult, let alone looked so happy doing it. I can see that, sweetheart. But maybe Mr. Hammond has important work to do. Marcus, he corrected, looking up at her with an expression that was almost sheepish. And apparently this is important work. Mr. Hoppy has very high standards for his tea parties. Mr. Hoppy's real name is Warren, Sophie whispered conspiratorially to Marcus. But that's too serious for a rabbit, so I call him Mr. Hoppy. That's very reasonable, Marcus replied gravely. Warren is definitely too serious. Emma stood there, uncertain how to process this version of Marcus Hammond, the man who'd seemed so cold and distant last night, now sitting on the floor playing pretend with her 3-year-old. Before she could speak, Liam's cry came from the bedroom. I'll just... Emma gestured toward the sound. Take your time, Marcus said. Sophie and I have important business to discuss regarding the proper ratio of sugar to tea. An hour later, after Emma had fed and changed Liam, the four of them sat at the dining table with breakfast that Marcus had ordered from room service. Sophie was working her way through a stack of pancakes with intense focus, while Liam dozed in Emma's arms. I made some calls this morning, Marcus said, cutting his omelet with precise movements. I've contacted my real estate manager about the property on Maple Street. The demolition is cancelled. Emma's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Cancelled? But I thought. I'm keeping the house. At least for now. He set down his fork, his business demeanor firmly back in place. But you can't stay there. It's not safe, and it's not appropriate housing for children. We need to find you something better. I can't afford. I own 17 properties in this city, Marcus interrupted. Most of them are investment properties that I rent out. One of them is a 3-bedroom townhouse in Riverside Park that's currently vacant. The previous tenants moved out last month. Emma felt her pulse quicken with a dangerous hope. Mr. Hammond, Marcus, I appreciate everything you've done, but I can't accept charity. I need to be able to support my children on my own. It's not charity. It's employment. Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping through screens until he found what he was looking for. My head of household staff retired last month. I've been meaning to hire a replacement but haven't had time. The position includes overseeing my primary residence, managing my calendar for personal appointments and coordinating with various service providers. It also includes managing the townhouse in Riverside Park where you'd be living, maintenance, repairs, that sort of thing. Emma stared at him. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a position with competitive salary, benefits, and housing. The salary is $75,000 per year, plus full health insurance for you and your children. You'd have flexible hours because I'm rarely home anyway. The townhouse would be yours to use as long as you're employed. $75,000. Emma's last job had paid $28,000. She'd never even imagined earning that much money. It seemed impossible, like a dream she'd wake up from at any moment. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for us? Marcus was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with suppressed emotion. When I was 14, I was placed with a foster family, the Johnsons. They were older, their own kids grown. They didn't need the state money. They just wanted to help. He paused, his jaw working. Mrs. Johnson taught me how to cook real food, not just ramen and canned soup. Mr. Johnson helped me with my homework every night, even though he'd worked 12-hour shifts at the factory. They were the first people who made me believe I could be something more than a foster kid heading nowhere. What happened? Emma asked gently. Mr. Johnson had a heart attack. Mrs. Johnson couldn't manage on her own, and I got moved to another home. But those 8 months, they changed everything. They showed me that people could be kind without wanting something in return, that I was worth investing in. Marcus looked directly at Emma. I'm not a good person. I'm not doing this because I'm charitable or generous. I'm doing this because Sophie deserves the same chance they gave me. Because Liam deserves to grow up in a stable home with a mother who isn't scared every single day. And because you deserve to stop fighting alone. Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. I don't know what to say.
Say yes.
Come see the townhouse. If you hate it, we'll figure out something else. But at least give yourself the option. Sophie, who had been listening intently while eating her pancakes, piped up. Mama, can we see the house? Please. Emma looked at her daughter's hopeful face, at the baby sleeping in her arms, and at the man across the table who was offering them a lifeline. Every instinct she developed over years of disappointment told her to be cautious, to expect the catch, to protect her heart. But another part of her, the part that had broken into an abandoned house to keep her children safe, recognized that sometimes you had to take a leap of faith. Okay, she said. Let's see the house. The townhouse in Riverside Park was nothing like Emma had imagined. She'd expected something serviceable, probably outdated, maybe a bit run down. Instead, Marcus's car pulled up to a charming brick building with ivy climbing one wall and window boxes that, though currently empty, promise flowers in spring. It was built in 1920, Marcus explained as he unlocked the front door. I had it renovated 3 years ago. Hardwood floors, updated kitchen and bathrooms, new HVAC system. The previous tenants kept it in good condition. Emma stepped inside and felt her breath catch. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a spacious living room with built-in bookshelves and a fireplace. The floors gleamed with polish, and the walls were painted in soft, neutral tones that made the space feel warm and welcoming. Sophie ran ahead, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood. Mama, come see. There's a real kitchen with a real stove. The kitchen was indeed real, beautiful, even, with white cabinets, granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances that looked like they'd barely been used. French doors led to a small backyard with a patio and a patch of grass surrounded by a tall fence. A yard, Emma whispered, thinking of all the times she'd taken Sophie to crowded public parks because they had nowhere else to play. She could play outside. The bedrooms are upstairs, Marcus said, leading the way to the second floor. There were 3 bedrooms, just as he'd said. The master bedroom was spacious, with an attached bathroom and a walk-in closet. The second bedroom would be perfect for Sophie, and the third, smaller but still cheerful, would be ideal for Liam as he grew. Emma stood in the hallway between the 3 rooms, holding Liam against her shoulder, and felt something inside her break open. She'd been so strong for so long, holding everything together through sheer force of will, never allowing herself to imagine something better because hoping hurt too much when it didn't come true. But standing here, in this beautiful home that could be theirs, she couldn't hold back anymore. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes with her free hand. "I'm not usually such a mess." Marcus, who had been examining the thermostat with intense focus, turned to face her. "You're not a mess. You're human. There's a difference." I've been so scared. Every single day, I wake up terrified that something will happen to them, that I won't be able to protect them, that I'll fail as their mother. The words poured out of her, released by exhaustion and hope and the overwhelming relief of maybe, finally, being safe. "And I know you don't owe us anything. I know this is too much, and I should probably be more cautious, and I should ask more questions about what you expect in return." "I expect you to do the job I'm hiring you for," Marcus said firmly. "I expect you to keep this house maintained, help manage my schedule, and coordinate with my staff. That's all. The rest," he gestured to the townhouse around them, "is just a place to live. Everyone deserves a safe place to live." Sophie appeared in the doorway of what would be her room, carrying Mr. Hoppy. "Mama, can we stay here? Please? There's a window seat in my room, and I could read books there, and Mr. Hoppy really, really likes it." Emma looked at her daughter, at the hope shining in her eyes, and felt her resistance crumble completely. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Yes, we can stay here." Sophie's squeal of delight echoed through the empty house. She ran to Emma, hugging her around the waist, and for a moment, they stood there, mother, daughter, and baby, in the doorway of their new life. Marcus cleared his throat. "I'll have my assistant draw up the employment contract and arrange to have the utilities transferred into the company name. You can move in whenever you're ready. I'll also have her order some basic furniture if you don't have." "I don't," Emma admitted. "Everything I own fits in 2 garbage bags." Something flickered across Marcus's face, recognition, maybe, or understanding. "Then we'll get you what you need. Make a list. Jennifer will take care of it." "I can't let you buy me furniture," Emma protested. "That's too much. It's a furnished rental. That's standard." His tone brooked no argument. "Besides, you'll need somewhere to sleep tonight, and I doubt you want to stay at the hotel indefinitely." He was giving her an out, Emma realized. A way to accept help without feeling like she was taking charity. It was kindness disguised as pragmatism, and it made her like him even more than she wanted to. "Thank you," she said softly, "for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. You've changed our lives." Marcus looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. He shifted his weight, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I should get back to the office. I have meetings this afternoon. Jennifer will be in touch about the contract and the furniture. If you need anything else, you have my number." He was already walking toward the stairs when Emma called after him. "Marcus? When you were living with the Johnsons, the foster family who helped you, did you ever get to thank them for what they did for you?" He stopped, his hand on the banister. "Mr. Johnson died before I could. But I found Mrs. Johnson 5 years ago. She was in a nursing home, her memory mostly gone. She didn't remember me." His voice was quiet, distant. "But I made sure she had the best care available for the rest of her life. I visited her every week until she passed. And when she died, I established a foundation in their name that provides college scholarships for foster kids." Emma felt tears pricking her eyes again. "They would have been proud of you." "Maybe." Marcus started down the stairs, not looking back. "Or maybe they would have wondered why it took me so long to do something good." After he left, Emma stood in the empty townhouse, holding Liam while Sophie explored every corner of her new room. Through the window, she watched Marcus's car pull away, and she thought about what he'd said, that he wasn't a good person, that he wasn't doing this out of kindness. But Emma knew better. She recognized what he couldn't see in himself, that somewhere underneath the success and the wealth and the carefully constructed walls, there was still that scared boy who'd been shown kindness and had never forgotten it. He was paying forward what the Johnsons had given him, even if he couldn't admit that's what he was doing. And Emma made herself a promise. She would prove worthy of this chance. She would work harder than she'd ever worked. She would show him that his faith in her, in them, wasn't misplaced. She would make him proud, the way she wished someone had made him feel proud when he was young and alone and trying so hard to survive. 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and careful adjustments. Emma threw herself into her work with an intensity that surprised even her. She managed Marcus's personal schedule with meticulous attention, coordinated repairs on his properties, and kept the townhouse immaculate. The furniture Jennifer had ordered arrived within days, simple but quality pieces that transformed the empty townhouse into a real home. Sophie had adjusted to their new life with the resilience of childhood. She'd made friends with a neighbor girl her age, and Emma had enrolled her in a preschool program that Sophie loved. Liam was thriving too, growing bigger and more alert every day, his tiny smiles becoming more frequent. But Emma saw Marcus rarely. He worked constantly, leaving before dawn and returning late at night to his penthouse across the city. Their interactions were primarily through text messages and emails, all business and efficiency. Emma told herself this was fine, better, even. She was his employee, not his friend. The distance was appropriate, professional. Still, she couldn't help but wonder about him. The man who'd played tea party with Sophie that first morning had vanished, replaced by the distant billionaire who communicated primarily through his assistant. Emma caught herself checking her phone more often than necessary, hoping for a message from him rather than from Jennifer. She was organizing Marcus's home office one afternoon, a task he'd finally authorized after 3 weeks of her polite requests, when she found a photograph tucked into a desk drawer. It showed a young boy, maybe 10 years old, standing between a smiling black man and a white woman. They were in front of what Emma immediately recognized as the house on Maple Street, but in this photo, it was beautiful, freshly painted, the porch sturdy, flowers blooming in the yard. The boy was grinning, gap-toothed and happy, holding a basketball. That's not where that belongs. Emma jumped, spinning around to find Marcus standing in the doorway. She'd been so absorbed in the photo that she hadn't heard him come in. It was only 2 in the afternoon, the earliest she'd ever seen him home. "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly, returning the photo to the drawer. "I wasn't snooping. I was just organizing and I found it and it's fine." Marcus walked into the office, loosening his tie.
He looked tired, she noticed.
More than tired, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work. "That's my parents. That photo was taken about a year before my mother got sick." Emma studied his face, seeing the tightness around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Bad day. Bad week. Bad month, actually. He sank into his desk chair, rubbing his temples. "I lost a major deal this morning. 3 months of negotiations down the drain, because one of our partners got cold feet. My board is questioning my judgment. And I've had about 6 hours of sleep in the past 3 days." It was the most personal thing he'd shared with her since they'd moved into the townhouse. Emma hesitated, uncertain whether he wanted comfort or privacy, then decided to take a risk. "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't from a takeout container?" she asked. Marcus looked at her in surprise. "I don't remember."
"Why?"
"Because you're going to burn out. And then where will I be? Unemployed with a 3-year-old and a baby." Emma crossed her arms. "Come on. I'm making you dinner." "You don't have to. Part of my job is managing your household, right?" "Well, you're part of the household, and you look like you're about to collapse. So yes, I do have to." She headed toward the door, then paused. "Besides, Sophie asks about you every day. When is Mr. Marcus coming to visit? She'd love to see you." Something flickered across Marcus's face, surprise, then something softer. "She asks about me?" "Constantly. I think you made quite an impression with that tea party." Emma smiled. "So come on. I'm making pot roast, and I promise it's better than whatever 5-star restaurant you usually order from." 2 hours later, Marcus sat at Emma's dining table, his dining table, technically, but it felt like hers now, watching Sophie demonstrate her new skill of building block towers while Liam dozed in a bouncer nearby. The townhouse smelled incredible, filled with the rich aroma of roasting meat and vegetables. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd been in a home that felt this lived in, this warm. Mr. Marcus, watch this. Sophie carefully placed another block on her tower, tongue sticking out in concentration. This is my tallest one ever. That's very impressive, Sophie. Marcus found himself genuinely interested in her architectural efforts. Have you thought about reinforcing the base? It might help with stability. Sophie looked at him with wide eyes. What's reinforcing? It means making it stronger. See if you put wider blocks at the bottom. Marcus got down on the floor, showing her how to create a more stable foundation. Within minutes, they were deeply engaged in building the tallest, strongest tower possible. Emma watched from the kitchen, stirring gravy, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This was dangerous, she knew. Letting herself see Marcus this way, relaxed, playful, human, was a risk she shouldn't take. He was her employer. This was a business arrangement. Getting emotionally attached would only lead to heartbreak. But watching him patiently teach Sophie about structural integrity, seeing the rare smile that softened his usually stern features, Emma couldn't help but feel something shift inside her. "Dinner's ready," she called, forcing her thoughts back to safer territory. They sat together around the table, and Emma served pot roast with potatoes and carrots, warm bread and salad. Marcus took his first bite and closed his eyes, something like relief washing over his face. "My mother used to make pot roast," he said quietly. "I haven't had it since I was a kid." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Is it close to how you remember?" "Better, actually. Or maybe I just forgot how good it could be." He took another bite, and Emma saw him visibly relax, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Thank you for this. I didn't realize how much I needed it." "Everyone needs home cooking sometimes," Emma said. "And you need to take better care of yourself. When was the last time you took a day off?" Marcus considered the question. "Define day off. A full 24 hours where you don't check your email, don't take calls, and don't think about work." "Then never." "I've never taken a day off." Emma set down her fork, staring at him. "Never? Not even when you're sick?" "I don't get sick. I don't have time to get sick." But even as he said it, Marcus knew it sounded ridiculous. He sighed. "I know what you're thinking, that I'm a workaholic who needs better boundaries." "I'm thinking that you're scared," Emma said quietly. Sophie was busy cutting her meat into tiny pieces, not paying attention to the adult conversation. "Scared that if you stop moving, stop working, stop proving yourself, everything will fall apart." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Emma met his eyes steadily. "I spent 8 months terrified every single day, working every hour I could, never resting, never letting my guard down, because I was convinced that one mistake would cost me everything. I know what it's like to be so afraid of losing what little you have that you can't ever let yourself just breathe." The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice rough. "How did you stop being afraid all the time?" "I had help. Someone gave me a chance to feel safe again." Emma's smile was gentle. "Someone showed me that not everyone in the world is out to hurt me, and that sometimes accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Marcus understood what she was saying, that he'd given her that chance, that gift. But he couldn't quite accept the comparison. "That's different. You needed help. You had children to protect. I'm just what? Just a person who works too hard and never lets anyone close? Just someone who's still trying to prove to that scared 11-year-old inside you that you're safe now." Emma reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. "Marcus, you gave me and my children a second chance at life. Let me give you something in return. Let me give you a place where you can just be human for a few hours." Sophie chose that moment to announce, "Mr. Marcus, you're my friend now. Mama says friends take care of each other. So you have to come have dinner with us more, okay?" Marcus looked at the little girl with her earnest face and her mother's determined eyes, and felt something in his chest crack open. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll come to dinner more." Sophie beamed. "Good. And you have to play blocks with me after dinner. I want to build a castle this time." "A castle sounds perfect," Marcus agreed, and meant it. "After dinner, While Sophie played and Liam had his evening feeding, Emma and Marcus cleaned up together in comfortable silence. It felt natural, domestic in a way that should have made Marcus uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said as she dried the dishes he washed. "About the house on Maple Street. You said you were going to keep it. What are you going to do with it?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands still in the soapy water. "I don't know yet. I thought demolishing it would give me closure, but now, I think maybe that house deserves better than to be erased. It wasn't the house's fault that bad things happened there. It was just a place where a family lived and loved, and then lost everything. So maybe it could be a place where good things happen again," Emma suggested softly. "Maybe." Marcus pulled the plug, watching the water drain. "I've been thinking about the Johnsons, about how they opened their home to an angry, defensive kid who didn't trust anyone. They didn't have much money, but they had love and patience and time. And it changed my life." "You want to do something similar," Emma guessed. "The foundation I started, the one in their name, it helps foster kids pay for college. But I've been thinking it should do more. What if we renovated the house on Maple Street and turned it into a transitional home for teens aging out of foster care? A place where they could live while they get on their feet, learn life skills, have support." Emma turned to face him fully, her eyes shining. "Marcus, that's a beautiful idea. It's probably too complicated. Too expensive. It's perfect," Emma interrupted. "It's exactly what that house should be. A place that helps kids who have nowhere else to go. A place that turns pain into purpose." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he'd been carrying for decades starting to unravel. "Would you help me? With the project? You understand what it's like to need help, and you're good with people. I'm better with numbers and business plans." "Of course I'll help," Emma said immediately. "I'd be honored to help." They stood there in the kitchen, the evening light fading outside, and something fundamental shifted between them. This wasn't just employer and employee anymore. It was something deeper, more complex, a partnership built on shared understanding and mutual respect. From the living room, Sophie called out, "Mr. Marcus, I'm ready to build the castle now." Marcus smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Duty calls." As Emma watched him settle onto the floor with Sophie, patiently helping her engineer a castle worthy of princesses and dragons, she felt her carefully maintained emotional distance crumbling. She was falling for him, not the billionaire, but the man underneath. The one who played with her daughter. The one who wanted to turn his childhood trauma into something that helped others. The one who was slowly, carefully, learning to let someone care about him. It was terrifying and exhilarating and probably incredibly foolish. But watching Marcus laugh as Sophie crowned him royal castle builder, Emma thought maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. The transition home project consumed their evenings over the following weeks. After Marcus finished work, he'd come to the townhouse where Emma had prepared dinner. They'd eat together, sometimes with Sophie's enthusiastic help, sometimes with her watching cartoons in the living room, and then spread architectural plans and budget spreadsheets across the dining table while Liam slept nearby. "The contractor says we need to completely redo the electrical system," Marcus said one evening in late December, marking notes on the building plans. "The whole house needs to be brought up to current safety codes." "How much?" Emma asked, reviewing the budget on her laptop. "Another 40,000. Emma winced but nodded. "It's necessary. We can't have kids living there if it's not safe." She'd gotten comfortable using "we" when discussing the project, and Marcus had stopped correcting her. "I want to add a library," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to what had been his childhood bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Comfortable chairs. A place where kids can escape into stories when reality is too hard. Emma's heart squeezed. She knew he was thinking of his younger self, the boy who'd lost everything and had nowhere to turn. "That's perfect. And maybe we could have a study area too? Somewhere quiet for homework. The attic could be converted. There's good light up there." Marcus made another note. "We should also have a community kitchen, teach them cooking skills, budgeting for groceries, meal planning. All the things nobody teaches you when you're in the system." They worked late into the evening, planning every detail. Emma noticed how animated Marcus became when talking about the project, how the usual tension in his shoulders eased, how he smiled more readily. This was healing him, she realized. Transforming his painful past into something that would help others was giving him a sense of purpose beyond business success. "It's snowing," Sophie announced, pressing her face against the window. "Look, Mama." Big, fat snowflakes. Emma glanced outside to see thick snow falling in the glow of streetlights. It had been threatening all day, but now it was coming down in earnest. "Wow, that's really coming down." Marcus checked his phone, frowning. The Weather Service just issued a winter storm warning. They're saying 6 to 8 inches by morning. He stood, gathering his papers. "I should get going before the roads get too bad." "You could stay here," Emma heard herself say, then immediately felt her cheeks heat. "I mean, the guest room is empty. It doesn't make sense for you to drive across the city in a snowstorm when there's a perfectly good bed here." Marcus hesitated, and Emma could see him weighing the offer, the practical against the personal. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "You own the house, Marcus. How could you possibly be imposing?" Emma smiled. "Besides, Sophie would love it. She's been asking when you're going to have a sleepover." "A sleepover?" Marcus looked alarmed. I've never done a sleepover." "Never?" Emma was shocked. "Not even as a kid?" "Foster kids don't usually get invited to sleepovers," Marcus said quietly. "And by the time I was making friends in college, I was working too much to socialize." Emma felt a wave of sadness for the child he'd been, excluded from the normal rituals of childhood. "Well then, it's time you experienced one. Fair warning though, Sophie takes them very seriously. There will be pillow forts and bedtime stories involved." Marcus surprised himself by saying, "That sounds nice, actually." 2 hours later, Marcus found himself sitting inside an elaborate pillow fort in Sophie's room, reading Where the Wild Things Are by flashlight while Sophie and Mr. Hoppy listened with rapt attention. Emma sat nearby with Liam, who was drowsy after his feeding, and Marcus was acutely aware of her presence. The soft sound of her breathing, the gentle way she swayed to soothe the baby, the smile playing at her lips as she listened to him read. This felt dangerously like family, like belonging, like home. All the things Marcus had taught himself not to want because wanting them hurt too much. When Sophie finally fell asleep, clutching Mr. Hoppy and wearing her favorite princess pajamas, Marcus and Emma carefully extracted themselves from the pillow fort. They stood in the hallway between the bedrooms, suddenly awkward now that they were alone. "Coffee," Emma offered. "I know it's late, but I'm not really tired yet." "Coffee sounds good." They settled in the living room with steaming mugs, watching the snow continue to fall outside. The townhouse was quiet except for the gentle hiss of the radiators and the occasional creak of old floorboards. It was peaceful in a way Marcus rarely experienced. No constant notifications, no urgent emails, no pressure to perform. Just quiet, comfortable existence. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, curling her legs under her on the couch. "It might be too personal, so you can tell me to mind my own business." "Go ahead. Why haven't you ever gotten married? Or been in a serious relationship, as far as I can tell from managing your calendar?" Emma blushed. "Sorry, that was incredibly nosy." Marcus smiled slightly. "It's okay. The answer is complicated." He paused, considering how much to share. "I've dated. There have been women over the years. But I've never let anyone get close enough to really matter." "Why not?" "Because everyone I've ever loved has left me." The words came out raw, honest. "My parents died. The Johnsons had to give me up. Every foster placement ended eventually. I learned that caring about people means giving them the power to hurt you. So I stopped caring." "But that's not really living," Emma said softly. "That's just surviving." Surviving was enough. For a long time, it was all I knew how to do. Marcus set down his coffee mug, staring at his hands. "And then I met you and Sophie and Liam, and suddenly surviving doesn't feel like enough anymore. Suddenly I want." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. Emma waited, her heart pounding, sensing they were on the edge of something significant. What do you want, Marcus? She asked gently. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emma saw vulnerability in his eyes that took her breath away. I want this. These dinners. These conversations. Playing blocks with Sophie and reading her stories. Watching you with Liam. I want to come home to something that feels like family instead of an empty penthouse. And that terrifies me. Emma set down her own mug, her hands trembling slightly. Why does it terrify you? Because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you deserve, what Sophie and Liam deserve. I know business and success and how to make money. I don't know how to be human, how to be part of a family. Marcus. Emma shifted closer to him on the couch, close enough that their knees almost touched. You've been doing it already. Every time you play with Sophie, every time you ask about our day, every time you stay for dinner, even though you're exhausted, that's being human. That's being family. What if I mess it up? The question came out almost whispered. What if I hurt you? Or disappoint Sophie? What if I prove that I'm just as broken as I think I am? Emma reached out, taking his hand in hers. His skin was warm, his palm calloused despite his wealth, evidence of his early years of hard labor. We're all broken in some way. I'm a single mother with trust issues who broke into your house because I was desperate. You're a workaholic billionaire who doesn't know how to let people love him. Sophie's going to grow up without a father. Liam will never know his. We're all damaged. That's not exactly reassuring, Marcus said, but he didn't pull his hand away. But here's the thing. Broken doesn't mean worthless. Damaged doesn't mean irreparable. Emma squeezed his hand gently. You've spent your whole life trying to be perfect, trying to prove you're worthy of taking up space in the world. But you don't have to be perfect, Marcus. You just have to be willing to try, to show up, to let yourself care about people even though it's scary. And if I fail, if I can't be what you need, then we figure out together. That's what family does. Emma smiled, tears shining in her eyes. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're already so much better at this than you believe you are. Marcus looked at their joined hands, then up at Emma's face, her kind eyes, her hopeful expression, the gentle strength that had carried her through impossible circumstances. He thought about how she'd transformed his empty townhouse into a home, how she'd welcomed him into her life without hesitation, how she'd seen past his wealth and success to the lonely boy underneath. I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words both terrifying and liberating. With all of you. With Sophie's laugh and Liam's tiny hands and your strength and your kindness and the way you make me want to be better. And I have no idea what to do about it. Emma's breath caught. She'd known her own feelings were spiraling beyond professional, beyond friendship, but hearing Marcus voice what she'd been afraid to acknowledge made it real, undeniable. You could kiss me, she suggested, her voice barely audible. That would be a start. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, reverent. Are you sure? Because if we do this, I'm all in. I don't know how to do anything halfway. I'm sure, Emma whispered. I've been sure for weeks. I've been falling for you too, Marcus. Even though it's complicated and probably foolish and definitely unprofessional. He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. It was a kiss that held years of loneliness and longing, a kiss that promised possibility and hope, a kiss that felt like coming home after being lost for a very long time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to work too much and forget to communicate and do everything wrong. Probably, Emma agreed, making him laugh. And I'm going to be stubborn and independent and resistant to help. We're both disasters in our own ways. So, what do? We try anyway. We take it slow. We figure it out as we go. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. And we remember that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for each other, even when it's hard. Marcus kissed her again, softer this time, savoring it. I can do that. I can show up. I know you can. You already have been. They stayed up late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the city in white, and inside the townhouse, two broken people found something they'd both stopped believing in: the possibility of healing through love. When Marcus finally made his way to the guest room in the early hours of the morning, he felt lighter than he had in years. He was still scared, still uncertain, still convinced he'd probably messed this up somehow. But for the first time in his life, he had something worth being scared about, something worth fighting for. And that made all the difference. Spring came to the house on Maple Street like a benediction. The renovation had taken 4 months, countless meetings with contractors, and more of Marcus's personal involvement than any project he'd overseen before. He'd insisted on approving every detail, from the color of paint on the walls to the books that would fill the library shelves. Now, in early May, the house was finally ready. Emma stood on the freshly repaired porch, holding Liam on her hip while Sophie danced around her, excited about the grand opening. The house looked transformed, the Victorian exterior restored to its former glory with a fresh coat of sage green paint, white trim, and a new porch that no longer sagged. Window boxes overflowed with bright flowers, and the lawn, once overgrown and wild, was neatly manicured. But the real transformation was inside. Marcus emerged from the house, wiping dust from his hands. Despite Emma's protests, he'd insisted on helping with the final setup, unwilling to delegate everything to the staff they'd hired. "The library is ready. The bedrooms are made. I think we're actually going to pull this off." "Of course we are," Emma said, reaching for his hand. "We make a good team." Over the past 5 months, they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Marcus still worked long hours, but he made time for family dinners at least 4 nights a week. He'd learned to put his phone away during meals, to get down on the floor and play with Sophie, to hold Liam while Emma showered or cooked. He'd learned that being vulnerable wasn't weakness, and that asking for help wasn't failure. And Emma had learned to accept that help, to trust that Marcus's presence in their lives wasn't temporary, to believe that some people actually meant it when they made promises. They hadn't rushed anything. Marcus had his own room at the townhouse now, but they'd taken their physical relationship slowly, both of them cautious about moving too fast with children involved. Sophie adored Marcus, had taken to calling him "my Marcus," with proprietary affection. Even Liam, now 7 months old and crawling everywhere, would light up when Marcus walked in the room. "The first residents arrive tomorrow," Marcus said, his voice tight with nerves. "What if this doesn't work? What if I've built this whole thing, and it doesn't actually help anyone?" Emma squeezed his hand. "It will help. You're giving 6 teenagers a safe place to land during one of the hardest transitions of their lives. You're giving them what the Johnsons gave you, a chance." The Johnson House, as they'd officially named it, would house 6 young people aging out of foster care. Each would have their own bedroom, access to the community spaces, and support from a live-in house manager and rotating counselors. They'd pay minimal rent based on their income, learn life skills, and have up to 2 years to get on their feet before transitioning to independent living. Marcus had funded it entirely himself, but Emma had been integral to the planning. She'd helped interview the house manager, worked with social services to develop the program guidelines, and even designed the welcome packets each resident would receive. This was their project, their baby, their way of turning pain into purpose. "Mr. Marcus." "Mama, come see what I found," Sophie called from the backyard. They followed her voice to discover her kneeling by the old oak tree, the same one where Marcus's childhood treehouse had been. She was pointing at something carved into the bark, worn but still visible. "Marcus plus Mom plus Dad." Marcus stopped breathing. He'd carved that when he was 8, after a particularly happy summer day spent playing in the yard with his parents. He'd completely forgotten about it. "You lived here when you were little?" Sophie asked, looking up at him with wide eyes. "In our house." "Yes," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "A long time ago." "Was it happy when you lived here?" Marcus knelt beside her, running his fingers over the carved letters. "Sometimes it was very happy, and sometimes it was very sad. But it was home." Sophie considered this seriously, then announced, "Well, Now it's going to be happy again. Because we're making it a good place for kids who need homes.
Right.
Right, Marcus agreed, pulling her into a hug. That's exactly what we're doing. Emma watched them together. This man who taught himself not to need anyone, holding her daughter with such tenderness it made her heart ache. Liam babbled from her arms, reaching toward Marcus, and Marcus took him easily, settling the baby on his hip while keeping one arm around Sophie. This is it, Emma said softly, looking at the house, the tree, the family they'd built. This is what healing looks like. The grand opening was attended by social workers, local politicians who'd supported the zoning changes needed for the project, and representatives from the foster care system. But the people Marcus cared about most were the 6 teenagers who would be the first residents. He'd reviewed all their files personally, had interviewed each of them alongside Emma and the house manager. Now they stood in the entrance hall, 3 girls and 3 boys, ages 16 to 19, all with similar stories of loss and resilience, all desperately trying to look tough, while their eyes revealed their fear and hope. I know what you're thinking, Marcus said, addressing them directly while Emma stood beside him with Liam. You're thinking this is too good to be true, that there's a catch, that adults always promise things and then disappoint you. The teenagers shifted uncomfortably, a few exchanging knowing glances. You're right to be suspicious, Marcus continued. I was you once. I aged out of foster care with nothing. I lived in my car. I worked 3 jobs. I know exactly how hard it is, and I know that trust is a luxury you can't afford. One of the girls, Jasmine, 17, with fierce eyes and defensive body language, spoke up. So what's the catch? Why are you doing this? Marcus smiled slightly. The catch is that you have to let us help you. You have to show up for the life skills classes, meet with your counselor, and work or go to school. You have to try. That's the only catch. And if we mess up, asked Devin, 18, who'd been homeless for 6 months before being referred to the program. Then we figure out how to do better next time. This isn't a one-strike-can-you-out program. This is a place where you learn, grow, and become who you want to be. Marcus gestured around the house. Every one of you deserves a chance to succeed. This house is that chance. Emma stepped forward, Liam on her hip. I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. 8 months ago, I was living in this house illegally with my 3-year-old daughter because I was desperate and alone. Marcus found me here, and instead of calling the police, he gave me a job and a home. He changed my life. Now he's trying to do the same for you. The teenagers looked at her with new interest, seeing someone who understood their struggle, who had survived it. We're not going to pretend this is easy, Emma continued. Life is hard, and sometimes it's not fair. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. That's what this place is for, to give you support while you figure out your next steps. Over the next few hours, they showed the residents around, answered questions, and helped them settle into their rooms. Marcus watched as each teenager explored their space, the first time most of them had ever had their own room, and saw his younger self in their faces. That evening, after the official events were done and the residents were settling in, Marcus and Emma stood on the porch of the Johnson house, watching the sun set behind the old oak tree. Your parents would be proud of you, Emma said, leaning against him. You took the place where you lost everything and turned it into somewhere that gives everything to kids who need it. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on her head. I couldn't have done this without you. You saw what this place could become before I could. We did it together, Emma corrected. That's what we do now. We're a team. Sophie came running out of the house, followed by one of the residents, Maya, 16, who'd already taken a liking to the little girl. Mama, Mr. Marcus. Maya says she knows how to make flower crowns. Can we make some before it gets dark? Of course, Emma said, smiling at the teenager who was trying to look cool but couldn't quite hide her pleasure at Sophie's attention. As they sat together on the porch making flower crowns, Marcus surprisingly good at it, Emma discovering hidden reserves of patience, Sophie providing enthusiastic if unskilled assistance, and Maya gradually relaxing into the simple joy of the activity, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in decades.
Peace.
Belonging. Home. I love you, he said quietly to Emma while Sophie and Maya were focused on their creations. I love all of you. I love this life we're building. Emma looked up at him, her eyes shining. I love you too. And I'm so proud of what you've created here. What we've created, Marcus corrected, echoing her words from earlier. What our family created. Family. The word no longer terrified him. Instead, it felt like a promise, like possibility, like the future he'd stopped letting himself imagine. 3 months later, Marcus proposed to Emma in the library of the Johnson house, surrounded by the books he'd carefully selected and the teenagers who'd become like family to them both. He got down on one knee while Sophie bounced excitedly beside him, and Liam clapped his chubby hands, not understanding but sensing the importance of the moment. I was lost for most of my life, Marcus said, holding Emma's hands while tears streamed down her face. I didn't know what home felt like until I found you in my abandoned house, trying to make a home for your children. You taught me that family isn't about blood or biology. It's about showing up for each other, choosing each other every day, building something beautiful from broken pieces. Yes, Emma said before he could even ask the question. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in the backyard of the house on Maple Street, under the old oak tree where Marcus had once carved his family's names. Sophie was the flower girl, Liam was passed around by adoring guests, and the 6 residents of the Johnson house stood as witnesses to the ceremony that joined 2 people who'd both learned that it's never too late to find home. As Marcus kissed his bride while their children and their extended family cheered, he thought about the terrified boy he'd once been, living in this house and believing he'd always be alone. He thought about the Johnsons, who'd shown him that kindness existed. He thought about the scared young mother he'd found that November day, who'd shown him that his past could become his purpose. And he thought about the future, not just his and Emma's, but the future of every young person who would walk through the doors of this house and find the support they needed to build lives worth living. The house on Maple Street had been a place of loss and pain and abandonment. Now it was a place of second chances, of chosen family, of love that healed old wounds. Now, finally, it was home. Epilogue 5 years later. Marcus stood in the backyard of the expanded Johnson House campus, watching Sophie, now 8, teach a group of younger children how to build the perfect pillow fort. Liam, nearly 6, was helping by providing enthusiastic but chaotic assistance. Emma stood beside Marcus, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, their 3rd child due in just 2 months. The original Johnson house had been so successful that they'd opened 3 more in different cities, each one helping dozens of teenagers transition to independent living. The foundation had grown beyond Marcus's wildest dreams, providing not just housing but scholarships, job training, and ongoing support. Devon, one of their first residents, now worked as a counselor at Johnson House too. Jasmine was in her 3rd year at university, studying social work. Maya had graduated and started her own business, though she still came back to volunteer every weekend. Look at what we built, Emma said softly, gesturing to the campus, the children playing, the teenagers helping prepare dinner in the community kitchen, the life they'd created together. Look at what love built, Marcus corrected, pulling her close. Look at what happens when broken people refuse to stay broken. Sophie ran over to them, flushed and happy.
Dad.
Liam knocked down the fort again. You have to come help us rebuild it.
Dad.
The word still made Marcus's heart swell every time Sophie said it. He'd officially adopted both Sophie and Liam after the wedding, giving them his name and his promise to always be their father. Coming, princess, he called, then turned to Emma. You going to be okay? I'm perfect, Emma said, kissing him softly. Go build pillow forts with your children. I'll be here, being grateful for the day you found us in your abandoned house. Best trespassing incident of my life, Marcus teased, making her laugh. As he jogged toward his children, Marcus Hammond, former foster kid, self-made billionaire, husband, father, and founder of a network of homes that had helped hundreds of young people, felt the last pieces of his broken heart finally heal. He'd spent his whole life running from his past, trying to erase the evidence of where he'd come from. But in the end, it was returning to that past, transforming it, and sharing it with others that had saved him. Love had saved him. Family had saved him. Emma and their children had saved him. And in saving him, they'd created something that would save countless others. The house on Maple Street would never again be a place of abandonment. It would always be a place where lost children found their way home. Just like Marcus had. Just like Emma had. Just like Sophie and Liam had. Just like hundreds more would, for years to come. And it all started with one unexpected meeting, one act of compassion, and two broken people brave enough to believe in second chances.